Hi, good morning, everyone. We're going to give about another minute or so as people, trickle in. So just give us about another minute and we'll get started. Thank you. All righty, let's get it started. Hi, everyone. My name is Martha Barker, and I manage Catapult's TPA for Consumer Directed Health and COBRA Administration. I help employers keep their benefit plans compliant and easy for employees to use. Joining us today are two amazing guests from NFP. Nancy Perri, Vice President of Corporate Benefits. She helps design benefit packages that work for both employers and employees. And we also have Randy Riggins. He is the Senior Vice President and he specializes in retirement plans and financial strategy. So we have two great people that are going to talk with us about this One Big Beautiful Bill Act and what it means for your benefits and your retirement plans. At the end, I'll share some key tips employers should keep in mind when testing their benefit plans. So that non-discrimination testing, we'll talk a little bit about that just to make sure that you're staying compliant and effective. With that, I'll turn it over to Nancy and Randy. They'll help us with some of the details of this beautiful Bill Act and share some insights on how it can impact your benefits and retirement strategies. We'll leave all questions to the end. We do have a pretty hefty agenda and lots of people joining us. So if you do have a question, put it on the chat, or you can email us at meeting@letscatapult.org. We'll put that email address on the chat as well. So if you have any questions, you can just email your question there, or you can add it to the chat and we'll make sure we'll cover it. With that, Randy and Nancy, please take it away.
Thank you, Martha. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I want to just provide a little disclaimer. Nothing that we discuss today is intended to be tax or legal advice. This is for general guidance and educational purposes only. If you have any specific questions on the application of the new law, they should be directed to your legal counsel or tax advisor. Also, anything that we discuss today is based on the knowledge of what we know now and today. Even though the act was passed several weeks ago, there are several aspects where we are hoping for some additional guidance from the federal agencies that are tasked with interpreting the law, namely the IRS. The law is sparse on some of the new employee benefit provisions, and any new guidance we receive will likely impact our interpretation of the outstanding questions. So as we receive updates, we will be sure to distribute them to Catapult. And we do also have a Compliance Corner newsletter that we release biweekly. So if you are not on our distribution list and would like to do so to receive these updates, please let us know, and we will be sure to include you on any future correspondence that we have out there. So with that being said, for today's agenda, we will be referring to the One Big Beautiful Act as the Tax Act. The OBBBA sometimes can get a little cumbersome, so we're just going to refer to the Tax Act. Given that it's summer, a popular time for travel, what we've done is we've adopted a trip planning theme for today's agenda. I'm going to be discussing the benefit provisions, and then Randy's going to be speaking about the Trump accounts. So what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to provide a brief overview of the legislative process, where the bill started, where it ended up, and a little bit of what happened in between. We're going to unpack the essentials. So the essentials meaning how it pertains to the benefits, and that is the telehealth and HSA, which is what we've received a lot of questions about, the direct primary care component of it, the dependent care assistance, the DPAC expansion. We won't be providing educational assistance program updates, but we will have that. If you want, you can receive our contact information at the end. And then Randy will be discussing the Trump accounts as well as some additional updates. We also are going to be getting into a small portion of the repealed employee benefit provisions. So what's got tossed from the initial bill, and then some things that happened during the reconciliation. So with that being said, for the Tax Act, the first version of the bill, like I said, is much different than what was finalized. So the first version was introduced to the House in May and included a number of provisions related to HSA rules as well as ICRAs. Those are individual coverage arrangements. The initial version is very different from the final version. The House initially passed this with a very slim margin, and then the bill went to the Senate. The Senate introduced its own version of the bill, removed some employee benefit provisions, and then added some others. This process is called the budget reconciliation. The bill then got reworked and some final changes were made, and the Senate passed the final bill on July 1st by one vote, just one vote. The version went back to the House and it was approved on July 3rd. The bill was signed on July 4th and became the Tax Act. So now let's get into what is happening. So unpacking the essentials of the benefits. The biggest inquiry that we're getting questions on and that we're finding has impacted employers is HSA eligibility and as it pertains to telehealth. This is probably the most impactful to employers. The issue here initially occurred during the pandemic, where the telehealth coverage was changed for HSA eligibility with participants in a high deductible health plan. The question is whether it makes someone eligible or ineligible to make contributions to their HSA account. Relief was first passed in 2020 as part of the pandemic response, allowing first dollar coverage without impacting HSA eligibility. That relief was expired, it was reissued, it expired again, and then most recently it ended up in December 2024 without renewal. And what that means is that the current bill prior to the Tax Act was that first dollar or low-cost telehealth coverage is considered impermissible coverage, making a high deductible health plan participant ineligible to contribute to receive or make HSA contributions to their account because telehealth is providing coverage before the deductible has been met. So prior to the pandemic, you were not able to have that as part of the HSA contributions and contributing to your HSA. What the Tax Act does is now it reverts back to the earlier relief, meaning that telehealth coverage can be offered at low or no cost before meeting the statutory minimum deductible. And this does not impact HSA eligibility to make or receive contributions to your HSA. Some notable takeaways for employers is that this new provision is optional. So it is not mandatory. It's not automatic. If an employer wants to make this change to their high deductible health plan and their HSA eligibility, some best practices is that we encourage all employers to take a look at their plan documents and to see if you want to implement this. Again, it's not mandatory. It's not required. And if you decide to do so, there may be some updates. Well, there will be updates that you'll need to make. You'll need to release new summary material modifications, consult with your carriers or your TPA vendors regarding telehealth vendors. Consider the timing of the change. So as we all know, mid-year changes are never fun. And if this is something that you wish to adopt, although it is retroactive back to January 1st of 2025, we've not found or have heard of any vendors that are willing or able to retroactively go back to modify those changes. So what that means is if you add or if you change or if you want to modify your existing program, changing wanting to do so is not something that the carriers that we're finding are willing to do at this point. If it's something that self-funded clients tend to do or want to do, we recommend that you wait until the renewal plan year is in effect. Some things that you will need to consider in regard to making those changes, if you do so moving forward, is that you want to ensure that your summary of benefits and coverage are updated and that they're reissued in a timely manner. Something to be aware of. So not all employers were made aware that once the initial law was expired, that they made it impermissible for individuals to contribute to or to receive HSA payments for that coverage. So if you had a telehealth provider after it expired and folks were allowed to contribute to their HSA accounts or make elections, this new bill will cure any non-compliance that you have as a result of that. So what we are advising folks to do is some things to think about from a strategic standpoint is if you do not have a telehealth component included in your high deductible health plan, that's something you may want to consider. We do have employers that have a separate standalone telehealth vendor, and you can continue to do so. However, having it as part of your high deductible health plan administratively sometimes makes it easier. We want you to make sure that you are educating employees about these resources because having telehealth medicine as part of your plan, as part of your medical plan offerings, is typically less expensive than the traditional providers when you will go face to face. And then also know that this relief is permanent prior to it having impermissible, then permissible, then impermissible again. This is a permanent relief. So moving forward, this is going to be set in place and that we don't no longer have to wait for any extensions for making this plan change. Again, this is effective January 1st, 2025. It is retroactive. However, if an employer wants to make an adoption retroactively, it still requires you to update your plan documents, to advise your employees, and to release those summary of benefit descriptions. Our recommendation is waiting until renewal if you decide to make that modification to your plan. So moving on to individual coverage. So not as many questions. We aren't receiving as many questions in regard to this, but a next notable change that has taken place as a result of the Tax Act is that individuals that are enrolled in a qualified high deductible health plan that meet the statutory minimum deductible amount, so that's $1,650 per individual, $3,300 per family, and then the out-of-pocket maximum of $8,300 and $16,600 are, and they don't have any other disqualifying coverage, are eligible to contribute and to receive contributions into an HSA. So only those that are in that qualified high deductible plan. That's the current ruling. This new modification, this new part of the Tax Act, changes what qualifies as a high deductible health plan to include and to expand bronze level marketplace as well as catastrophic marketplace individual plans. So these plans do not need to meet those minimum deductible or maximum out-of-pocket threshold levels, those statutory amounts. These plans are now treated as high deductible health plans, even if they don't meet those statutory amounts, which most of them are considered many catastrophic plans. So what this does is it impacts or it expands, it allows employers who contribute to an individual's ICRA accounts. So if you are an employer, most of these are small employers, and you offer ICRAs as part of your offering, employers will now be able to make contributions into the HSA accounts. So individuals can receive and pay for those deductible amounts with their HSA account. So this is now effective January 1st of 2026. We typically only see these offerings with smaller employers, but it is a modification, and we find it is a welcome one. So moving on, direct primary care. This is another one that we're receiving a good bit of amount of questions in regard to this modification. So starting with some background. In June of 2022, the IRS and the Treasury issued proposed regulations defining what a direct primary care arrangement was. And this was under Section 213 of the IRS Code, which defined medical expenses. This was prompted by an executive order to improve affordable care access recognized by the direct primary care arrangement. So the proposed rules in 2020 defined a direct primary care arrangement as a contract between an individual and one or more primary care physician to provide medical care for a fixed periodic fee without any third-party billing. The fees could be considered medical expenses or medical insurance, depending on the arrangement. Individuals with a DPCA, so a direct primary care arrangement, were generally ineligible to contribute to an HSA unless the fees were solely for preventative services or permitted coverage. With some changes to the Tax Act, what that does now is that it creates a statutory category. So the new statutory category is called a direct primary care agreement, different than what was originally proposed as a direct primary care service arrangement. This we find or have found that this is legislative response to the ambiguity in the 2020 regulations. The goal for this is to expand DPC coverage while preserving your HSA eligibility. Periodic fee for primary care services are usually or must be delivered by a licensed practitioner. The focus for this is on primary care, and it excludes any services beyond routine outpatient care. The statute has asked the agencies, mainly the IRS, to provide some additional guidance defining what primary care is. So what we're hoping is in months to come, hopefully weeks to come, we'll receive some additional guidance in regard to that definition. Now, I do want to make a distinction between a consulate medicine as well as direct primary care. So although the direct primary care and the consulate medicine both have membership fees, they differ. And hopefully what we're hoping, again, is that additional guidance will be able to draw this distinction further. However, as it stands with the new regulations, these DPCSA will have a capped monthly fee of $150 per individual and $300 per family, and this is going to be indexed annually. This is going to be for actual care, no insurance billing. The fee is going to go toward the cost of the care. With consulate medicine, it's a little bit different in that the arrangement is that higher access fees, usually about $1,500 or more, are billed annually. And these fees cover enhanced access and coordination. So they provide additional services to the primary care visits. And that typically is access to 24-hour care, extended office hours, your annual physical. The fee for the consulate medicine is not the sole payment for care and is typically not HSA reimbursable. So the fee generally acts towards care or convenience. Because of this, that fee is not reimbursable from an HSA. So again, with the new direct primary care service arrangement, it's going to be for primary care services. The fee cannot exceed $150 per individual, $300 per family, and the fee goes toward the cost of the care. The takeaway with this is that the DPCSA fee, so the Dependent Care Service Agreement, must meet the definition of direct primary care in order to be HSA eligible and HSA reimbursable. This fee is going, and this service is going to be in effect January 1st, 2026. And the primary goal of this is to preserve the HSA eligibility that can be made in regard to having the direct primary care arrangement. What we're hoping, again, is that we are going to receive some additional guidance and direction from the Department of Labor, the IRS, Treasury Department, and we are suggesting that employers that do offer this type of arrangement look to their HSA vendor for additional guidance. Again, as we receive additional guidance, we will distribute that information to our clients and folks that would like to receive that. Something else that I would like you to be aware of, that we would like you to be aware of, is just to make sure that if you do offer this type of arrangement, to make sure that it meets those specifications of $150, no more than $150 per individual, $300 per family, and it's solely on direct primary care or primary care services, core primary care services. Even if something says that it's direct primary care, we want to make sure that that definition is included and it's not just something that has a name of direct primary care arrangement. So moving on to dependent care. So dependent care is a benefit that our friends at Catapult are providing for many of our clients, as well as their clients. And we are excited to be able to let you know that these amounts have been extended. The last time this amount has been extended was 40 years ago. So in 1986, the regulations allowed that if you have dependents, you are able to set aside pre-tax dollars. It's $5,000, the annual max if you're single or you're married and filing jointly, and $2,500 if you are married and filing separately. The limits again changed. The limits again are 40 years old. So in 1986, $5,000 equated to about $15,000 today. This has been the only time that amount has been changed, which we find a long time ago. The new limit, so the new tax act, what it does is it increases the amount for dependent care. So it's $7,500 now if you are single, married jointly, or $3,750, so $3,750 if you are married and filing separately. This is still not indexed for inflation, so it will require further legislation to change it. We are hoping that it doesn't take another 40 years to change that amount, but we are grateful that the amounts have been increased. Some takeaways for employers to be aware of is that this is optional, so it's not an automatic benefit, it's not a mandatory benefit. This is something that we are advising employers to decide whether they would like to adopt this modification. If you do make this modification, it's very important that you coordinate with your FSA vendor, your payroll vendor, your plan documents, that you update your plan documents, that you educate, and over-educate your employees that you have available that are receiving this benefit. And something else that we want you to be aware of is it is wonderful, and we feel that it's great that this amount has been increased. However, something to think about is your non-discrimination testing. So Section 129 IRS code says that having higher, so there's the 55% participation test. And what that means is that an employer we need to make sure that they're not top heavy in regard to making those contribution amounts. We have found, and I'm sure our friends at Catapult have found, that typically highly compensated individuals are the ones that typically make that contribution amount and typically use that contribution amount. So if you are an employer that fails that test or has failed that test at the previous limits, there's a greater chance that you're probably going to fail that test, moving those increased amounts to those higher limits. If you do increase the higher limits, you want to make sure that you have that non-discrimination testing. It's no fault to any employers. It's not something that they're doing incorrectly, but we have found typically what happens is the highly compensated individuals are the ones that make that amount, that contribution amount, and we don't want you to fail the test. So if you're thinking about it, make sure that you get that testing done. And then this is effective January 1st of 2026. Again, it's optional. It's not automatic. Update, communicate, over communicate. Work with our friends at Catapult to make sure that you're getting that testing done and meet those thresholds so that you don't fail.
We have one quick question, Nancy. Does this
Mhm.
for dependent care apply to FSA and HSA plans?
So this is just for the dependent care portion of your FSA. So with with the dependent, so you have your FSA eligible for your medical expenses, and then you have your dependent care FSA for reimbursement amounts for child care expenses. And I apologize for not saying that ahead of time. So it is for child care expenses that are associated with the dependent care portion of your FSA. Do we have any other questions? I'm sure we do. But we'll have to hold off on those questions till later time. So something else that, let's see, okay, employer, sorry, I've got two screens on here that I'm looking at. So in regard to the Dependent Care Paid Family Leave Act. So a tax provision that received an extension for the Tax Act is the Paid Family and Medical Leave Tax Credit. So this was originally set in 2017. What the new provisions do to this is it designs a service that for employers who offer paid family leave to their individual employees. It allows them to make contributions for paid family leave. This was set in 2017 and it was set to expire in 2025. So this is now going to be a permanent credit, which will expand eligibility, and it will also include expanding eligibility for some paid family leave insurance premiums as well. Employers get higher credit percentage when paid leave is provided to lower paid workers. We have found that in specific industries like retail, hospitality, and healthcare, this benefit typically will help with attracting and retaining employees and part of your overall strategy. This new tax amount could help to offset the paid leave costs as part of the total reward strategy. And although the credit could offset the cost of providing leave for workplace retention, we do suggest that you consult with your tax advisors. Again, this is not tax information, but we want to make sure that you are abiding by the law. And the amount of the credit depends on how much the employee earns. So this expansion of Paid Family Medical Leave Act is something that we will hope to receive additional information in regard to the Paid Family Medical Leave Act credit. And then last part of it is just to let you know of what changed in regard to the reconciliation. So some things that were dropped is originally there was potentially some increased contribution limits in regard to FSA, HSA contributions. They're capped at that $7,500. There was initial conversations of folks that were moving from a PPO to a high deductible health plan or vice versa in regard to being able to carry over those dollar amounts. So that is no longer part of the bill. Fitness costs and gym reimbursements, there was some language included initially to include that as part of HSA eligible expenses. So that has been modified, as well as Medicare Part A not being considered impermissible coverage, and then on-site medical equipment. And then the last part of it is the bicycle reimbursement. So there have been employers that have been providing reimbursements for bicycle commuting, and this included things such as repair to the bicycle, some tax credits in regard to purchasing them. Employers could reimburse bicycle commuting expenses on a tax-free basis, subject to certain limitations. And you can still do this. However, this is now a taxable benefit. So with this provision, it is still something that you are able to do, but it's a taxable benefit. So with all that being said, I am now going to pass the baton to Randy Riggins, who's in our Retirement Services Division. And he will be able to talk more about.
Yeah. Thanks, Nancy. If you could bring up our slide about the Trump funds for, okay, the one big beautiful bill. Good. So, you know, you think about this bill, this was pretty remarkable, the fact that they started drafting this bill in May and it became law, signed into law on July 4th. That was light speed in regards to things working in Washington, D.C. And you don't see things like that happen. You know, really what we're looking at here, and we can get this copy of this to you later, this was really what brought the whole thing up. In other words, back in 2016, there was some pretty dramatic tax legislation that was passed. But that legislation, like so many things in Washington, had a sunset provision. And that sunset provision was 12/31/25, meaning that here's the law, 10 years later, it's going to go away. And whatever the law was before that's going to now still become the law again. And that was going to mean a significant tax increase to every single American. And that this was what was really driving the urgency that everybody knew that this had to happen this year. And to be honest with you, most people thought it was going to be like in the third or fourth quarter. So the fact that it happened, like I said, and got signed into law July 4th was pretty remarkable. So all that happened for the most part was what was passed in 16 was solidified again here in 2025. Now, what does this do? This just really gives businesses and everyday Americans certainty of what the tax situation is going to be. If we would have gone through all of this year not knowing what was going to happen 1/1/26, it would have been hard for companies to prepare and plan, expand, build plants, etc., not knowing that the tax environment could have been far different. Now, this is a good piece, and I would we're going to make this available to everybody. But it's funny, all of the deal making that took place in order to get this passed is really what Nancy just went over. Those were just said, okay, I'll vote yes if you do this for me. Okay, I'll vote yes if you do this for me. I'm going to vote no if you don't do this for me. So those were just the deal makings that was going on that ultimately solidified the tax brackets for Americans. And it worked. It was, like I say, it was pretty remarkable. One of the things, you know, there was a couple of things that took place that were unique. In other words, they passed a bill, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. They're talking about no tax on Social Security, you know, with some caveats. But one of the things was, President Trump said, okay, we're going to set up an account for any children that are born. And if you can, Nancy, bring up the Trump accounts. Yeah, that's it. Second page. Now, to be honest with you, this is one of those things you say, wow, this sounds good, but it sounds a little bit better than it really is. But all truth be told, I happen to have a client whose son had a child last week, and he's going to be able to set up an account and get $1,000, a one-time $1,000 contribution into an account. But to be honest with you, I've got to call Vanguard and Fidelity and other people and say, okay, tell me how to set this up, because we really don't know. There hasn't been a whole bunch of guidance. And in addition to that, it's going to allow parents to make contributions into this account. And there's a couple of things that people, they completely hadn't thought through. You know, not many parents want to build up a gigantic account, and when the child turns 18 years old, they get to have total control over all that money, no holds barred. And even the parents don't even have any ability to keep the child from spending the money. You know, they could go out and buy a Corvette when they get on their 18th birthday, and there's nothing they could do about it. All that being said, 529 plans still is a superior way for parents to invest for the future of their children, i.e. for education, etc. But all that being said, who's going to walk away from $1,000 account that the government's going to fund? Again, with the understanding is we don't quite yet know how to set the account up and how do we get $1,000 from the government to fund that account. But we'll figure it out, and we'll figure it out quickly. And this is going to happen in 2025, 6, 7, and 8. And, you know, probably by the time we get deep into 28, they'll, you know, pass a bill that just probably modifies this a little bit, but pushes it on down the road. I can't imagine they would do this for 4 years and stop. That just doesn't seem likely. But like a lot of things in Washington, almost everything is passed with a sunset provision, just like this original tax bill was in 2016. And all that does is just say, look, you got to get your act together and come up with a way of getting this pushed down further when you get to 2025, which is exactly what happened. Anyway, pretty interesting stuff. I don't even know how, I'd love to know if somebody could say, how did this pop into Donald Trump's mind to set up this account? Well, you know, we may never know that. This has been good. And Nancy, you did a great job, by the way, navigating us through this. Well, I also thought I would bring up a couple of things. I'm in the retirement plan business and have been for 41 years. And, you know, we just went through, not related to this, but Secure Act 1.0 and 2.0, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, but it was staged over the course of a few years. And there's a couple of things that are happening that I just want to remind you of. You know, one of them is the following. Beginning on 1/1/26, highly compensated employees, and I'm using that term assuming everybody knows what it means, but in IRS lingo, if you look at a population of employees, they're either, according to their terms, a highly compensated employee, and the definition is 160K of annual compensation, or non-highly compensation, a non-highly compensated employee, which would be someone making less. But regardless, anybody who is a highly compensated employee and they want to make a catch-up provision, meaning they got to be 50 or older, they've saved the limit and want to save more, those are going to be, they're going to have to be in the form of a Roth account after tax. Now, that's a big deal. And it's even, it's a big deal for the employee, but it's a real big deal for your payroll department having to deal with that. Matter of fact, it was supposed to go into effect 1/1/24, and between employers, payroll providers, record keepers for retirement plans, they said, look, you know, we hear what you want to do, but we just can't get this done administratively. So they pushed it out to 1/1/26. So this is really happening on 1/1/26 unless they change their mind again, but it doesn't look like they're going to. So you're going to have to be ready for this. So the first thing I would do is call your payroll provider and make sure and get their thoughts on how they're going to help you navigate this. Another thing that we're seeing is these catch-up provisions that have been available for a good number of years. They now have what's known as a super catch-up. Now, this is an optional benefit, and to be honest with you, not everybody's doing it. And also, to be honest with you, the people that are doing it are not doing a good job of promoting it within their company. And that's for folks that are 60, 61, 62, 63. They can contribute even more than the normal catch-up. So instead of $7,500 a year of an additional catch-up, they can contribute, you know, in excess of $10,000. Now, you know, when you're at age 60, 61, 62, 63, and you know that you're toward the end of your working career, many of those folks are trying to save every conceivable cent possible, knowing that they are getting ready to enter retirement and they're going to need all the money possible. So we can help you if you want to embrace that opportunity on how to deploy it and strategize on how to use it. It doesn't cost you, the company, anything, and it can be a wonderful benefit for some of your employees. So those are just a couple of things I thought would be relevant to many of the employers that are on this call as we, reach out and we start plowing toward the end of 25 and into 26. But the big thing in regards to this bill, I think if we were to take away one thing, is the fact that we solidified the tax environment for the next number of years. So that's a great thing. It's a great thing for businesses. It's a really great thing for your employees, and it should create a good business environment for the country. So with that, I think I'm ready to turn it over to, I guess, Melissa and Martha as they ask for any questions or comments. All this information we're going to make sure you get access to.
Okay. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Nancy. That was a lot of really good information. So we appreciate you guys taking time to speak with us and our members about the things that they should be considering for 2025 and beyond. Since we have a few minutes left, or actually a good bit of minutes left, I want to talk about non-discrimination testing very quickly. Although Randy and Nancy did speak on it, specifically on the dependent cares, the HSAs. And so if you take anything away from non-discrimination testing, or at least for the next few minutes, just remember this. If it's pre-tax, it has to be tested. Not every single benefit plan has the same type of tests, but if you're offering plans on a pre-tax basis, you have to test those plans. If you have a Section 125 plan, so these are the type of plans that allows employees to pay for their health insurance on a pre-tax basis, their vision, their dental, their flexible spending accounts, their dependent care accounts. You want to test these plans at least yearly. Plan documents should be created, but mainly what you want to do on a yearly basis is test them. If you have a flexible spending carrier or administrator, if it's not us at Catapult, they should be testing your plans. At Catapult, we test our member plans within 3 months of when the plan begins. So if you have an FSA with us, you will receive an email, like on that 3rd month of the new plan year saying, send us the information, send us this template so that we can test the plan. What that means is we're going to look at what Randy was talking about, your highly compensated employees, your key employees, to ensure that your plan is not top heavy. What that means is that those highly compensated employees, those employees that are making $160,000 or more a year, or that are owners, so if they have 5% ownership and they have, let's say, $150,000, I believe, it makes them a key officers. We want to make sure that those employees that are highly compensated or at the top are not being offered or taking advantage of these pre-tax benefits at a greater rate than the non-highly compensated employees. We want to test those plans, or you want to test those plans, because if those plans fail, then there are some like repercussions. Sometimes there are fees that you have to pay. Sometimes those highly compensated employees lose the tax advantage of the benefits that they have enrolled for. So very important. If anything, I just want to scare you. August 14th, you have been warned, you have been scared. Test your plans. If you have a 2025 plan, a Section 125 plan in 2025, or if you're offering an HSA, make sure that you test that plan before the plan year. So that way, if for some reason there has to be some kind of adjustments for your highly compensated employees, you have time. Don't wait till December 30th to test your plan because you literally have one day if your plan ends on December 31st. So you have been warned, you have been scared, test your plans. Same thing for the HSAs, make sure that you're testing those plans as well. We can help you at Catapult, but again, if you have a different administrator, they should be able to help you with that as well. Non-discrimination testing should be anything a good TPA offers as part of their services. Now that I've scared you enough, I'll tell you a little bit more about the Trump accounts. The Trump accounts are not part of a Section 125 plan. They should have a like a dedicated plan document for them. And they also will have a non-discrimination testing portion for them. We don't know what that looks like yet, but again, they're not part of your Section 125 plan or even like a dependent care plan. They're not part of that either. They're their own unique thing. For dependent care, like Nancy mentioned at the beginning, because these benefits are going to increase from $5,000 to $7,500, you want to make sure that your employees that are enrolling for the dependent care accounts, one, know the limits. So, like she said, like Nancy said, they don't have to enroll for the 7,500. You don't have to offer the 7,500, but if they do, test your plan within 3 months, just to make sure that that they don't lose that tax advantage and that you don't get in trouble by maybe having very low participation, etc. Those can be a little tricky. We're happy to test them for you at Catapult and run into, if there's any issues, we can kind of walk you through them, or at least how to solve them. Are there any questions on that? I don't see anything on the chat, but I want to make sure that I give a minute or so, or Nancy, Randy, if you want to.
I was just going to say some notable takeaways, Martha, for everyone. So regarding your HSA eligibility and telehealth, again, the new Tax Act does not inhibit folks from making those pre-tax dollars into their HSA or spending those dollars for HSA. So prior to that, using a telehealth provider made someone ineligible to legally make those contributions. And then the dependent care portion, like Martha said, just make sure that if you are offering it as open enrollment is approaching, communicate, over communicate, not only in regard to the dependent care portion, but also the HSA eligibility program. And then if you are using some type of consigliere benefit or direct primary care program in order to take advantage of the new tax credit as part of the Tax Act, just making sure that one, it is just used for primary care services and that those dollar amounts do not exceed those threshold amounts that I previously referenced of $150 and $300. Randy and I have been in this industry for quite some time. I've been in the employee benefit space for 25 years. And, at NFP, we want to make sure that our clients are compliant, and we're grateful for our partnership with Catapult and being able to help. So our contact information is on the screen. If you do have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to us. Catapult will also be fielding questions and connecting us with them. And again, please make sure you also consult with your legal department and your tax advisor. We do know that Catapult does offer some wonderful HR resources to be able to help you as well. So make sure you take advantage of that. You've got a wealth of knowledge with Martha and the team.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
This is all for our Thinking Differently. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email them at Lord, I forgot already. Look at me. meeting@letscatapult.org. If you have any questions, send them there. You can also reach out to Nancy or Randy directly or me directly. We're happy to help. Don't forget that we do have our employment and labor law update meeting coming soon. In Charlotte, it will be August 21st through the 22nd. And in Raleigh, September 4th through the 5th. And you have access to register now. I think Melissa is putting or will be putting a little QR code. So get your phones ready. Take a picture of that QR code if you want to register. It'll be great. And we'll be seeing you guys there. Thank you all so much for your time and attention, and we hope that you guys have a great day. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you, everyone.